Homemade doesn't mean handpicked from the dumpster, dear. Those words from my mother-in-law echoed in my mind as I stood in the beauty aisle of Marshall's, staring at my product line displayed prominently at eye level. The same creams she had once mocked at her dinner table were now being fought over by eager customers in her favorite department stores. But let me take you back to where it all began, back to my tiny kitchen where a mother's desperation to help her child turned into something far bigger than I could have ever imagined. The gentle whir of a hand mixer filled my small kitchen as morning light streamed through the window, casting a golden glow on the natural ingredients spread across my worn wooden counter. The scent of lavender and chamomile danced in the air, bringing me back to those precious Sunday afternoons spent with my grandmother. I could almost hear her voice. "Sarah, my dear, nature has given us everything we need to heal and nurture ourselves." My hands moved with practiced precision, measuring each ingredient carefully: organic shea butter, coconut oil, and the special blend of herbs I'd perfected over months of experimentation. As I worked, my 5-year-old daughter Emma sat at the kitchen table, her legs swinging freely as she colored, occasionally scratching at the angry red patches on her arms. "Mommy, is this batch going to make the itching stop?" she asked, her big brown eyes full of hope. My heart squeezed in my chest. We'd tried everything, every expensive cream and lotion that promised relief for her sensitive skin. Nothing worked, and watching her suffer had sparked something in me, a determination to find a solution, no matter what. "I think we're getting closer, sweet pea," I replied, testing the consistency of the cream between my fingers. It was perfect, silky smooth with just the right amount of thickness. The latest formulation had shown promise, with Emma's rashes looking less inflamed after just a few applications. The sound of keys in the front door announced my husband James's return from his morning run. He entered the kitchen, his face flushed from exercise, and planted a kiss on top of Emma's head before making his way to me. "Smells amazing in here," he said, wrapping his arms around my waist and peering over my shoulder. "Mom called, by the way. She's insisting we come to dinner tonight." I tried to hide my instinctive wince at the mention of Eleanor, my mother-in-law. The woman was the epitome of old money and brand names, from her perfectly coiffed silver hair to her designer shoes. She'd never quite approved of her son marrying a simple girl from the suburbs, and she made sure I knew it in 1,000 subtle ways. "I've been working on something special," I said, trying to sound optimistic as I began filling small glass jars with my creation. "I thought I might bring some of these as a gift for her." James's expression shifted to concern, but he didn't say what we were both thinking. Eleanor's track record with my little kitchen experiments, as she called them, was less than encouraging. As I labeled each jar with handwritten stickers, I remembered the last family dinner when she'd commented on my quaint little hobby in that perfectly cultured voice of hers. But something felt different this time. The formula was better, and I'd even designed elegant packaging that would appeal to her sophisticated tastes. Emma bounded over, her latest drawing in hand, a colorful swirl of flowers and what looked like jars. "Look, Mommy! I drew your magic cream making." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a surge of pride. My daughter believed in me, even if my mother-in-law didn't. I carefully packed 3 jars into a gift bag, adding dried lavender sprigs and a handwritten note explaining the natural ingredients. As I watched Emma's skin already looking calmer from this morning's application, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something bigger than just a homemade solution for my daughter. There was potential here, real potential, if only someone would give it a chance. Little did I know, as I prepared for another tension-filled dinner at Eleanor's mansion, that this evening would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything: my relationship with my mother-in-law, my family's future, and my own understanding of what I was capable of achieving. Eleanor's mansion stood like a fortress against the setting sun, its perfectly manicured gardens and sweeping driveway a testament to old money and older traditions. As James pulled our modest Honda up to the grand entrance, I clutched the gift bag on my lap, my knuckles white against the delicate purple tissue paper. Emma bounced excitedly in her car seat, already dreaming of the elaborate desserts her grandmother always served. "Remember," James squeezed my hand, "we don't have to stay late, early day tomorrow and all that." His attempt at providing an escape route was touching, but we both knew leaving early would only add to Eleanor's arsenal of complaints about my lacking social graces. The heavy oak door swung open before we could ring the bell, revealing Eleanor in all her glory. She wore a crisp Chanel suit in cream, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, and enough pearls to sink a small boat. "There's my precious angel," she cooed, completely bypassing me to scoop up Emma. "James, darling." She air-kissed her son's cheeks before finally acknowledging my existence with a thin-lipped smile. "Sarah, how comfortable you look." I glanced down at my carefully chosen cocktail dress, one I'd splurged on specifically for these dinners, and felt like I was wearing a potato sack. Eleanor had that effect on people, the ability to make even the most put-together person feel somehow lacking. The foyer opened into her formal dining room, where crystal glasses caught the light from an antique chandelier. The table was set for 6. Apparently, we weren't the only guests tonight. My stomach dropped when I recognized the other couple already seated, Margaret and Charles Winchester, Eleanor's oldest friends and fellow country club members. "You remember the Winchesters?" Eleanor gestured as we took our seats. "Margaret, you simply must tell Sarah about that wonderful new spa treatment you discovered. Her skin could use some professional attention." The slight pause before professional might as well have been a gunshot. I forced a smile, placing my gift bag beside my plate. "Actually, I've been working on some natural skincare products. I brought you something special to try, Eleanor." The words had barely left my mouth when I saw the familiar look of disdain cross her face. "Oh dear." Eleanor's laugh tinkled like ice in a crystal glass. "Not more of your kitchen concoctions? You know, there's a reason people trust established brands. No one wants to put something on their face that was mixed up between making pasta sauce and cleaning baby bottles." Margaret tittered politely while Charles became very interested in his wine glass. James tensed beside me, but before he could speak, Emma piped up, "But Grandma, Mommy's cream made my itchy spots better, see?" She proudly rolled up her sleeve to show her improving skin. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight. "Darling, I told your mother about that wonderful dermatologist in the city, Dr. Richardson. He treats celebrities, you know, but instead she insists on playing chemist in her kitchen." "Mother!" James's voice held a warning, but Eleanor was on a roll. "I just worry, you see," she continued, reaching for her wine. "It reminds me so much of my dear friend Victoria's daughter-in-law. She also had these creative aspirations, started selling homemade jewelry at craft fairs. Now they're divorced and she's living in a studio apartment. Such a shame." The threat was clear as crystal. Stick to being a proper housewife, or risk everything. But as I sat there, watching Eleanor dismissively push my gift bag aside without even opening it, something shifted inside me. I thought of Emma watching me give up. I thought of my grandmother's wisdom being dismissed as mere kitchen witchery, and somewhere, beneath the hurt and humiliation, a spark of defiance ignited. What Eleanor didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that earlier that day I'd received an email from a local boutique owner who'd tried my samples. She loved them. And suddenly, Eleanor's dining room, with all its oppressive elegance, felt less like a courtroom and more like a challenge. The soup course arrived, and as Eleanor launched into a story about someone's social faux pas at the country club, I quietly pulled out my phone under the table and confirmed that boutique meeting for tomorrow morning. Sometimes I realize the people who believe in you the least become your greatest motivation to succeed. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, I locked myself in our master bathroom and let the tears finally fall. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, a woman who'd spent years trying to gain approval from someone who had already decided she wasn't worth it. The gift bag sat unopened on our dresser, a tangible reminder of another failed attempt at bridging the gap between Eleanor's world and mine. "Sarah?" James's gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. "Honey, please open the door." When I did, his face crumpled at the sight of my red eyes. He pulled me into his arms, and for a moment we just stood there, the bathroom fan humming softly overhead. "I'm so sorry about Mom," he whispered into my hair. "She had no right to treat you that way." "What hurts the most," I said, pulling back to look at him, "is that she didn't even try it. She didn't even look at it, James. Do you know how many nights I spent perfecting that formula? How many research papers I read about natural ingredients? But in her eyes, I'll always be just the girl from the wrong side of town playing pretend." James led me to our bed, where Emma's latest business drawings were scattered across the covers, her 5-year-old interpretation of Mommy's cream-making business complete with stick figures and rainbow jars. "You know what I see?" he said, picking up one of the drawings. "I see someone who didn't give up when every expensive cream failed to help our daughter. I see someone who turned our kitchen into a laboratory because she refused to accept that nothing could be done." His words sparked something in me, a memory of the email still sitting in my inbox. The boutique owner who contacted me, she owns that little shop on Mason Street, the one with the crystal wind chimes. I pulled out my phone, showing him the message. She said her customers have been asking for natural skincare options. She wants to meet tomorrow. James read the email, his eyes widening. "Sarah, this is fantastic, but..." He hesitated. "Can we afford to make enough products for a retail store?" It was a valid question. Our savings were modest, and my ingredients weren't cheap. But then I remembered Emma's improved skin, the positive feedback from friends who'd tried my samples, and yes, even Eleanor's dismissal. Sometimes the universe has a way of pushing you exactly when you need it. "I think I know someone who might be able to help," I said, suddenly remembering the business card I'd gotten at last month's farmer's market. "Rita Martinez. She runs that big stall with the organic soaps. She offered to mentor anyone interested in natural skincare business." The next morning, after dropping Emma at school, I found myself standing outside Rita's workshop, a converted garage that smelled of essential oils and possibility. Rita was nothing like Eleanor. Her silver hair was tied in a messy bun, her clothes were splattered with colorful soap dyes, and her smile was genuine enough to crinkle the corners of her eyes. "Honey," she said after hearing my story, "every successful person started somewhere. You think Estee Lauder was born with a cosmetics empire? She mixed creams in her kitchen, too." She walked me through her workspace, showing me her setup. "What you need is someone to show you the ropes regulations, bulk suppliers, proper testing, and maybe," she winked, "someone to remind you that the people who mock your dreams often do so because they gave up on their own." As Rita talked about business licenses and lab testing, I felt the weight of Eleanor's judgment lifting. Here was someone who'd built something real from similar beginnings, someone who saw potential where others saw presumption. My phone buzzed, a text from the boutique owner confirming our meeting. Looking around Rita's successful workshop, I made a decision. Eleanor's dining room wouldn't be the last place my products were dismissed, but her favorite stores, they just might be the first places they'd eventually appear. The farmer's market buzzed with weekend energy as I arranged my display table, carefully positioning each jar to catch the morning light. Rita had helped me transform my kitchen experiments into something professional, proper labels, sealed containers, and even a small banner reading "Pure and Simple, Natural Skincare by Sarah." My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the testers, remembering Eleanor's voice. No one wants to put something on their face that was mixed up between making pasta sauce and cleaning baby bottles. But this wasn't Eleanor's pristine dining room. This was my moment. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Is this the cream Jennifer was raving about on Instagram?" A young woman in yoga pants stood before my table, phone in hand. She turned the screen toward me, showing a post from a local lifestyle blogger featuring my lavender chamomile cream. My heart skipped. I'd given Jennifer a sample 2 weeks ago, never expecting her to actually post about it. "Yes, that's us," I managed, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The woman picked up a jar, studying the ingredient list. "I'm Jenny," she said, looking up with bright eyes. "I'm doing my master's in marketing, and I have to tell you, you're sitting on gold here. Your branding needs work, but the product, the all-natural angle, the homegrown story, the fact that it actually works, this could be huge." Before I could respond, another customer approached, then another. By noon, I had sold through half my stock, and Jenny hadn't left my side, scribbling notes and taking pictures of customer interactions. "You need a social media strategy," she declared during a quiet moment, "and professional photos, and a story that connects with people. Let me help, it could be my thesis project." As if the universe was listening, my phone chimed with a text from James. "Mom just told everyone at her bridge club about your little hobby, trying to embarrass you. Backfired. They all want to know where to buy your kitchen potions." I showed the message to Jenny, who practically bounced with excitement. "Don't you see? This is perfect, the whole disapproving mother-in-law angle. People eat that stuff up. We could build a whole brand narrative around proving people wrong and believing in yourself." But success, I was learning, came with complications. As my small production space in Rita's workshop struggled to keep up with growing demands, I found myself facing new challenges. The local natural food store wanted to stock my products, but they needed consistency guarantees. The boutique owner called about expanding our line. Jenny's social media strategy was working almost too well. We couldn't keep up with orders. "You need help," Rita said one evening as we cleaned up after a marathon production session. "Real help. Someone who knows about scaling up natural cosmetics production." That's when I met Dr. Maria Chen, a cosmetic chemist who'd left the corporate world to consult for small, natural skincare brands. She took one look at my formulations and smiled. "These are good," she said, reviewing my methodically kept recipe journals. "Really good, but if you want to grow, we need to make some adjustments for scale." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lab testing, certification processes, and late-night study sessions. Dr. Chen taught me about preservation systems and stability testing. Jenny revamped our branding and started building our social media presence. Rita shared her supplier contacts and distribution knowledge. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mrs. Collins, this is Thomas Wright from Botanical Beauty Buyers. We've been following your growth, and we're interested in discussing a potential partnership." I nearly dropped the phone. Botanical Beauty Buyers supplied to every major department store in the region, including Eleanor's favorites. As I wrote down the meeting details with shaking hands, Emma wandered into the workshop, proudly wearing her junior CEO apron that Jenny had made for her. "Mommy," she said, holding up her arms, now clear of any rashes. "Grandma called. She said her friend Mrs. Peterson's daughter wants to know where to buy your cream. She saw it in the natural food store." I picked up my daughter, breathing in her sweet scent mixed with the lavender and chamomile that had started it all. "Should we tell Grandma to wait for the department store launch?" I whispered conspiratorially. Emma giggled, and in that moment, I realized something profound. Success wasn't about proving Eleanor wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself and my daughter that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the seeds of doubt that others plant. Success, I learned, was like a roller coaster. The higher you climb, the scarier the potential fall. And fall we did, spectacularly, just as things were looking their brightest. It started with a phone call from our main supplier, the one who provided our organic shea butter and essential oils. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins, but there's been a contamination issue at our warehouse. We're recalling several batches." My blood ran cold as she listed the lot numbers that matched the ingredients I'd used in our latest production run. 5,000 units, our largest order to date, all of it potentially compromised. I sat in Rita's workshop, surrounded by boxes of product we couldn't sell, watching our carefully built dream teeter on the edge of collapse. The lab testing alone would cost thousands, money we didn't have, Our savings were already stretched thin from scaling up production, and James's company had just announced downsizing plans. Maybe Eleanor was right, I whispered to the empty room. Maybe I was in over my head. As if summoned by my moment of doubt, my phone lit up with Eleanor's name. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Sarah, dear," her voice dripped with false concern. "I just heard the most disturbing rumor about your little business. Something about contaminated products? I've always said natural doesn't mean safe." I could picture her sharing this tidbit over martinis at the country club, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing dramatically as she detailed my failure. "Actually, Eleanor," I managed to keep my voice steady, "we caught the issue before any affected products reached customers. That's what professional quality control is for." "Oh, of course," she replied smoothly. "Well, there's no shame in admitting when something is beyond one's capabilities. I happen to know of several excellent employment agencies." After hanging up, I sat in my car and screamed. Then I cried. Then I looked at the photo of Emma on my dashboard, my daughter who'd never once doubted that her mommy could make magic cream, and I started thinking. Dr. Chen answered on the first ring. "Maria," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice, "I need your help. Could we reformulate using different suppliers? Maybe even improve the formula?" What followed were 3 sleepless nights of experimentation. Jenny camped out in the workshop with me, running social media damage control and keeping our customers updated. Rita connected us with alternative suppliers she trusted, and surprisingly, it was during this crisis that we stumbled upon something extraordinary. One of the new ingredients, a rare botanical extract Rita's contact provided, turned out to be more effective than anything we'd used before. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up when she saw the test results. "Sarah, this isn't just a fix for our supply problem. This is a breakthrough. The new formula was better than the original. Early feedback was overwhelmingly positive. But we were still facing a massive financial hole from the recall and reformulation process. That's when James came home with news of his own. "They're offering voluntary redundancy packages," he said quietly over dinner. "Pretty generous ones." The implication hung in the air between us. His job security for my dream? Emma looked between us, sensing the tension. "Daddy, did you know my magic cream business is going to be even more magical now?" she asked, pushing her peas around her plate. James reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Yes, sweetie, I think it is. Which is why Daddy's going to help make sure it happens." He turned to me. "Take the money, Sarah. All of it. I can find another job, but you're onto something special here." That night, as I updated our business plan with shaking hands, an email arrived from the patent office. The new formulation was unique enough to be patentable. We hadn't just survived a crisis. We'd emerged stronger. I thought about calling Eleanor, about telling her that her little hobby comment had just motivated her son to bet everything on my success. But instead, I called Dr. Chen. We had work to do, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I could picture Eleanor's face when she eventually discovered my products on the shelves of her favorite department store. Sometimes, I realized, rock bottom is just the foundation you need to build something extraordinary. Fame arrived on a Tuesday morning, wrapped in the perfectly manicured hands of Instagram influencer Sophia Chen. She had 2.3 million followers and a reputation for brutal honesty about skincare products. I nearly choked on my coffee when Jenny burst into the workshop, phone thrust forward, showing me Sophia's latest post. "I've tried every luxury cream on the market," the caption read beneath a photo of our signature jar. "But this small batch miracle from It Pure and Simple Skincare just changed the game. My rosacea? Gone. The price? Actually reasonable. The story behind it? Wait until you hear about the founder's journey." What followed was a beautifully crafted story, our story, that Jenny had strategically seeded weeks ago. Within hours, our website crashed from traffic. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Even Dr. Chen called, laughing. I hope you're ready for this, Sarah, because it's happening. But amid the chaos of that viral moment, one email stood out. Dear Mrs. Collins, I represent Brunswick and Shaw department stores. We've been following your brand's growth with interest. My hands trembled as I read further. Brunswick and Shaw wasn't just any department store. It was Eleanor's temple of high-end shopping, where she spent every Saturday afternoon having tea in their luxury boutique section. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. I wore my best dress, not the one I'd bought for Eleanor's dinners, but a new one, chosen with Jenny's careful eye for the woman I was becoming. The buyer, Catherine Maxwell, was everything I'd feared. Sharp, sophisticated, and initially skeptical. Your social media presence is impressive, she began, flipping through our portfolio. But what catches my attention is your patent-pending formulation. Natural products rarely achieve this level of innovation. I thought of those sleepless nights in the workshop, of James's sacrifice, of Emma's unwavering belief. Sometimes, I replied, meeting her gaze, the best innovations come from necessity. When you're formulating for your own child's sensitive skin, you don't stop until it's perfect. Catherine's expression softened. She reached for her phone, showing me a photo of a young girl with angry red patches on her arms. My daughter, she said quietly. We've tried everything. 2 hours later, I walked out of Brunswick and Shaw with a preliminary contract. We would launch in their flagship store next month, with potential for nationwide rollout. As I stood on the sidewalk clutching my portfolio, a familiar voice cut through my daze. Sarah? What on earth are you doing here? Eleanor stood before me, shopping bags in hand, her perfectly arched eyebrows raised in surprise. For once, I didn't feel small under her gaze. Business meeting, I replied simply. Brunswick and Shaw will be carrying Pure and Simple starting next month. Full luxury boutique placement. The flash of shock across her face was brief but unmistakable. But that's impossible. They're incredibly selective about their brands. They only take the best, I finished for her. Yes, they do. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite approval, not quite respect, but perhaps the first crack in her perfectly constructed wall of dismissal. Well, she said finally, I suppose I'll be seeing your products during my Saturday shopping. As she walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, my phone buzzed with another email. A major cosmetics corporation wanted to discuss acquisition possibilities. They'd seen Sophia's post, followed by Brunswick and Shaw's interest, and they wanted to move fast. That evening, as I shared the news with James and Emma over celebratory pizza, my daughter asked the question that stopped me cold. Does this mean Grandma will finally try your magic cream? I looked at James, who squeezed my hand under the table. You know what, sweetie? I think she just might. But more importantly, do you know what today proves? Emma shook her head, tomato sauce decorating her chin. It proves that sometimes when people tell you you can't do something, they're really just telling you they never tried hard enough themselves. The next morning, I arrived at the workshop to find a small package waiting at the door. Inside was a jar of expensive French face cream and a note in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. For comparison purposes only. E. I smiled, placing the jar on my shelf. The time for comparisons was over. We were about to write our own story in the beauty industry, and not even Eleanor could ignore it anymore. The conference room at Luminous Beauty Corporation felt a world away from my kitchen workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city skyline, and 6 executives in expensive suits sat across from me, sliding over paperwork that made my heart race. An acquisition offer for Pure and Simple, with more zeros than I'd ever seen in one place. We're prepared to make this transition seamless. Their CEO, Michael Richardson, smiled warmly. You'll retain creative control, of course, but with our resources and distribution network. He gestured expansively, painting a picture of global expansion, celebrity endorsements, and profit margins that made my head spin. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way they glossed over my patent-pending formulation, or how they mentioned slight adjustments to keep costs down. I remembered Eleanor's voice from years ago. Everything has a price, dear. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Speaking of Eleanor, she'd been unusually quiet since our encounter at Brunswick and Shaw, but that changed the evening before this meeting when she unexpectedly called James. "Mother, what do you mean be careful?" I heard him say from his study. "How would you know anything about Luminous Beauty's acquisition practices?" I was preparing dinner when he emerged, looking troubled. "Sarah, you need to hear this. Mom used to work in the beauty industry before she married Dad. She says Luminous Beauty has a history of buying small companies, stripping their formulas down to increase profits, and eventually phasing out the original founders." "Your mother told you this?" I nearly dropped the spatula. "Why would she warn us?" James ran a hand through his hair. She said she doesn't want to see another woman's dreams commercialized into mediocrity." The next day at school, Emma's class had Career Day. She proudly stood before her classmates, holding up a jar of my cream. "My mommy makes magic," she declared. "Not the pretend kind, but the real kind that helps people feel better. And nobody believed in her except us, but now everybody wants to buy her company because it's so good." Her teacher sent me a video of the presentation. I watched it in that sterile conference room while the executives waited for my answer, and suddenly everything became clear. "I appreciate your offer," I said, standing up, "but Pure and Simple isn't just a brand to be acquired. It's a promise I made to my daughter, to myself, and to every customer who trusted us. I won't compromise that." As I walked out, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected source. "Eleanor, before you make any decisions, come by the house. There's something you need to see." That evening, in Eleanor's immaculate study, she opened an old leather portfolio. Inside were yellowing papers, patents, formulas, and business plans. "30 years ago," she said softly, "I had my own skincare line, all natural, ahead of its time. A bigger company bought it, promised me the world. Within a year, they'd changed everything I'd built. Within 2 years, the line was discontinued." She handed me a faded magazine article featuring a younger version of herself in a lab coat. "I let them convince me that I needed them more than they needed me. Don't make my mistake, Sarah." For the first time, I saw Eleanor clearly, not as the intimidating mother-in-law, but as a woman who'd once stood where I was standing, who'd made a different choice and lived with the regret. "Is this why you were so hard on me?" I asked. "Because I reminded you of yourself?" She smiled sadly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I needed to see if you were stronger than I was." She walked to her vanity and opened a drawer, pulling out an empty jar of my cream. "It works better than anything I've tried in years, even on my mature skin." As I drove home that night, I thought about Eleanor's revelation, about Emma's proud presentation, about the integrity of what we'd built. The next morning, I called Catherine at Brunswick and Shaw to discuss expanding our partnership instead. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from selling out, but from standing firm. And Eleanor? She became our most unexpected ally, using her social connections to open doors I never knew existed. It turned out that the woman who once mocked my kitchen experiments had been waiting all along for someone to succeed where she couldn't, even if that someone was her daughter-in-law. The launch day at Brunswick and Shaw felt surreal. Our display stood prominently in the luxury beauty section, elegant and understated, just as Jenny had designed it. Crystal vessels held samples of our expanded line, the original cream now accompanied by serums, masks, and specialized treatments, each formulated with our signature botanical complex. But what caught everyone's attention was the enlarged photo behind the display. 3 generations of women in a sun-drenched kitchen. Emma sat on the counter, beaming at the camera. I stood beside her, demonstrating how to mix ingredients. And there was Eleanor, sleeves rolled up, fully engaged in the process. The photo had been her idea, taken during one of our new Sunday afternoon research and development sessions. "It tells the real story," she'd said during the photo shoot. "Not just of the products, but of healing skin, relationships, everything." The store was packed for the launch. Beauty editors mingled with social media influencers and longtime customers. Dr. Chen proudly explained our formulation process to anyone who asked, while Rita beamed like a proud mentor. Jenny flitted about, making sure every detail was perfect, occasionally squealing when another major beauty blogger arrived. Then the whispers started. "Isn't that Eleanor Collins in the advertising?" But I thought, Eleanor made her entrance precisely at noon, turning heads in her signature Chanel suit. But instead of her usual distant elegance, she walked straight to our display and picked up a jar of cream. "Ladies," she announced to her wide-eyed social circle who'd followed her in, "let me tell you about my daughter-in-law's brilliant innovation in skincare." She proceeded to give them the most compelling sales pitch I'd ever heard, weaving in scientific details she'd learned during our Sunday sessions with personal testimonials about how the products had transformed her skin. The society women who'd once tittered at Eleanor's dismissal of my kitchen experiments now lined up to make purchases. But it was what happened next that truly marked the changing tide. "Mrs. Collins?" A woman in a crisp suit approached Eleanor. "I'm from Neiman Marcus. We'd love to discuss nationwide distribution." Eleanor smoothly linked arms with me. "You'll want to discuss that with both of us. Sarah's the founder and formulator, of course, but I happen to have some experience in luxury retail distribution." Later that evening, after the successful launch, we gathered at Eleanor's house, not in her formal dining room, but in her kitchen. Emma helped James and Dr. Chen make pasta, while Jenny showed Rita how to use Instagram. Eleanor and I sat at the counter going over sales figures that had exceeded our wildest expectations. "You know," Eleanor said quietly, "I kept that first jar you brought to dinner, the one I wouldn't even open." She pulled it from a drawer, still wrapped in its purple tissue paper. "I think it's time we opened it together." As we unscrewed the lid, Emma bounded over. "Are you finally trying Mommy's magic cream, Grandma?" Eleanor dipped her finger in the cream, inhaling the familiar lavender chamomile scent. "No, darling, I'm trying your mother's legacy, and it's even more remarkable than I imagined." The next morning's Women's Wear Daily featured a photo of Eleanor applying cream to my cheek at the launch, with the headline, "Beauty industry's next big thing has a surprising family secret." But the real secret wasn't in our formulations or our marketing strategy. It was in the way failure and success had twisted together to create something stronger than either Eleanor or I could have built alone. That evening, as I worked on plans for our national rollout, I found a note slipped under the workshop door. Inside was a key and Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "To the executive office I never used. Your company's going to need a proper headquarters soon. Welcome to the family business, dear. They say success makes you more visible, but it also makes you more vulnerable." I learned this lesson at 3 a.m. when my phone exploded with emergency alerts. Our main production facility was on fire. I arrived to find flames licking the night sky, turning our dreams to ash before my eyes. Fire trucks crowded the parking lot, their red lights painting everything in surreal shadows. "The sprinkler system failed," the fire chief explained as I watched helplessly. "We contained it, but—" He didn't need to finish. One look inside told the whole story. Equipment destroyed, inventory ruined, and worst of all, our crucial botanical extracts, carefully cultivated and irreplaceable in the short term, were gone. Jenny was already handling crisis management on social media, while Dr. Chen assessed the damage to our research materials. James held me as I fought back tears, thinking of all the orders we couldn't fill, the contracts we might lose, the employees who depended on us. Then a familiar Mercedes pulled up, and Eleanor stepped out, still in her silk pajamas and bedroom slippers, a sight I never thought I'd see in public. "I saw it on the news," she said, her voice rough with concern. What do you need? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Brunswick and Shaw wanted to know if we could maintain our supply chain. Neiman Marcus needed reassurance about their upcoming launch. The investors we'd been courting were getting nervous. That's when Eleanor took charge. "Your warehouse," she said firmly. "The one you offered me the key to. It's just sitting there, isn't it? Fully climate controlled, already zoned for light industrial use?" "Mother, that's your—" "Don't be ridiculous, James. It's just gathering dust." She turned to me. "Sarah, how quickly can you move production?" The next 48 hours became a blur of activity. Eleanor's society connections proved invaluable. Everyone from contractors to city officials suddenly became incredibly cooperative when she called. Her warehouse, it turned out, was perfect for our needs, with even better facilities than our original space. But the real surprise came when Eleanor rolled up her sleeves, literally, and joined our emergency production team. "I may not have made cream in 30 years," she said, measuring ingredients with scientific precision, "but some skills you never forget." Emma set up a supervision station in the corner, drawing up elaborate plans for the new facility between her homework assignments. "See, Mommy? Now you and Grandma can make magic together." We worked around the clock, with Eleanor revealing an unexpected talent for logistics and supply chain management. Her old industry contacts proved invaluable in sourcing replacement materials. When our confidence wavered, she pushed us forward with a determination I'd once mistaken for criticism. Late one night, as we took a break from overseeing the setup of new equipment, Eleanor confessed something unexpected. "You know, I used to dream about this, having a family business, passing on what I knew. When James showed no interest in the beauty industry, I thought that dream was dead." She smiled wryly. "I never imagined my dream would come true through the very person I once saw as a threat to it." The crisis brought out the best in everyone. Jenny orchestrated a brilliant PR campaign around our phoenix-like rise from the ashes. Dr. Chen worked miracles reformulating some products to work with available materials. Rita and her network of artisanal producers helped fill supply gaps. But most remarkably, it transformed my relationship with Eleanor. Working side by side, sharing knowledge and experience, we developed a rhythm that transcended our past conflicts. She knew when to take charge and when to step back, when to offer advice and when to simply hold my hand through tough decisions. 1 month after the fire, we held a grand reopening at the new facility. As Eleanor and I cut the ribbon together, I noticed Emma whispering something to her grandmother. "What did she say?" I asked later. Eleanor's eyes misted slightly. "She said now she has 2 magical grandmas instead of 1. She straightened her jacket, composing herself. "We should probably look at expanding the research and development department next. I have some ideas about sustainable packaging." I smiled, recognizing this new version of Eleanor, still perfectionist, still driven, but now channeling those qualities into building something together rather than tearing things apart. 2 years after the fire, I stood in the gleaming lobby of our flagship store, hardly believing what we'd built. The space perfectly captured our journey. Warm wooden displays reminiscent of my old kitchen counter, elegant botanical murals commissioned by Eleanor, and at the center, a wall of photographs telling our story. From that first jar made for Emma's sensitive skin to our latest luxury line, each image captured a moment in our unlikely path to success. "Mom, Grandma, look!" Emma called out, pointing to the television mounted in the corner. The morning news was featuring our story. Pure and Simple opens 50th location, how a kitchen experiment became a beauty empire. Eleanor appeared beside me, as impeccably styled as ever, but now with a warmth that had replaced her former frost. "They're calling us the future of clean beauty," she said, adjusting a display with characteristic precision. "Though I prefer to think of us as the future of family legacy." The store was packed for the grand opening, with a line stretching around the block. Inside, our expanded team worked like a well-oiled machine. Jenny, now our chief marketing officer, orchestrated influencer appearances while Dr. Chen gave demonstrations of our newest innovations. Rita proudly trained new staff members in the art of natural skincare education. Mrs. Collins? A young woman approached Eleanor, clutching one of our signature jars. I started my own business because of your story, both of your stories, actually. She glanced between Eleanor and me. How you went from critics to partners. It gave me courage to pursue my dreams despite my own family's doubts. Eleanor's eyes met mine over the woman's head. Sometimes, she said softly, our greatest critics become our strongest allies when we refuse to give up on them or ourselves. The day's highlight came during my speech at the opening ceremony. As I thanked our team and supporters, I saved the most important acknowledgement for last. Success is often measured in numbers, stores opened, units sold, profits earned. But true success? That's measured in the bridges we build, the relationships we heal, and the legacy we create for the next generation. I gestured to Emma, who sat beaming in the front row. 2 years ago, my daughter told her class that her mommy makes magic. But the real magic wasn't in our formulas. It was in the way this business transformed our family. Later that evening, we gathered for a private celebration in Eleanor's kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd once dismissed my little hobby. Now it was our Sunday tradition, testing new formulations, brainstorming ideas, and simply being family. Emma, now 10, had her own lab coat and helped with simple experiments under Dr. Chen's supervision. I found something, Eleanor said, pulling out a dusty box. Inside was the original gift bag I'd brought to that fateful dinner years ago, still unopened. I thought today might be the perfect time to finally try it. As we opened the jar together, its lavender chamomile scent filling the air, I realized how far we'd come. That first cream hadn't just been about skincare, it had been about proving something to myself, to Eleanor, to the world. Now it represented something more, the beautiful possibility that lies in second chances and open hearts. You know, Eleanor mused, applying the cream with appreciative care, I spent years protecting my idea of perfection, never realizing that real perfection often comes from embracing our imperfections and each other. Emma watched us with bright eyes. Does this mean my kitchen experiments can become a big business too? Eleanor and I exchanged knowing looks. Sweetheart, I said, pulling her close, in this family, anything is possible, especially the things other people say you can't do. As the sun set on our biggest day yet, I thought about that desperate mother in her kitchen, mixing creams for her daughter's sensitive skin. She never could have imagined that her greatest success wouldn't be measured in stores or sales, but in the bridges built between 3 generations of strong women who learned that the most powerful magic of all is believing in each other. Eleanor raised her glass in a toast, to pure and simple, and to the not-so-simple journey that brought us here. I added my own whisper as our glasses clinked, and to all the kitchen experiments yet to come,